I got such a great response from my last video, my budget breakdown, with lots of great questions and comments. I decided to do a Q&A video to deal with the main questions that came up. But if you haven't seen that budget breakdown video, I'm going to put a link in the description below. You might want to check that out first. And I'll see you back here for the questions and answers. But it's a glorious day today, so I don't really feel like staying in to shoot the video. So I'm going to go out and about and answer the questions while I'm doing my daily walk. See you soon. Okay, so here we are. Now, a couple of the questions really, sort of took me by surprise, so I'll deal with those at the end. But the first one's a fairly easy one, and it came up a lot in the comments in various guises, but it amounts to this. If I have a pension of 32,700, which I do, how much did I accumulate in my pension pot? How much in terms of investments have I got in my pension pot? And I think the question arises because of a misunderstanding of how some of these public sector pension schemes work. Because the very simple answer is, in my pension pot I have nothing, zero. In fact, there is no pension pot. Civil servants make a contribution each month to their pension, and before I retired, they were deducting 4.6% of my salary on a monthly basis as a pension contribution. Now, nothing happens with that money. It doesn't go into a pot, it isn't invested. It's just a deduction on a payslip. So how does the pension itself build up? Well, for the civil service scheme, it builds up according to a formula, an arithmetical formula. Basically, that formula is the pension will increase by 2.32% of salary every year. So let's give a very simple example to keep the arithmetic simple. Let's say a civil servant starts in a part-time role earning £10,000 a year. Let's say they start when they're 27 years old. Well, after 1 year in the job, they will have £232 in their notional pension pot. If they do another year after that, and the salary doesn't change, then they would have a further £232 would go into the pot. That's £464. Now, just imagine that person works for 40 years in that role, never have a pay rise, always in the same job, at the same salary. Then they would have 40 times that £232, which comes to £9,280. So that's actually 92% of their salary. Now, that's a pretty unrealistic example, but you can see how the pension builds up. And the other thing to bear in mind is that the civil service scheme is an index-linked pension. So, as well as adding the 2.32% every year, what's already in that notional pot is uprated in line with inflation. So, and it's just a figure on a spreadsheet. As I say, there is no investment pot. So who pays this pension then? So it's paid by the active scheme members, so the current working civil servants who pay their contributions. And if that's not enough to pay all the retired civil servants, then that's topped up from general taxation. In other words, by the taxpayer. And that's how it works. So it's a generous scheme, as many people have pointed out. It's based on salary and number of years in the job. It's index linked every year, so it never loses value because of inflation. And at the end of my working life, the number on the spreadsheet corresponding to my name said £32,700. So that's how it works for me. So the second point is more of a comment than a question, and it was made by lots of people, and I'm happy to put the record straight because I got something wrong about the TV license fee. I said in the video that you had to pay the license fee for the pleasure of owning the TV. As I say, lots of people pointed my error out to me, and it seems that you need a license fee only if you watch live TV or you watch catch-up programs on BBC iPlayer. So, happy to be corrected and happy to put the record straight. And while we're on the subject of the BBC, it seems to excite people in a way that I hadn't anticipated. Quite a few people said they were quite interested in the video and were watching happily until I said I was a fan or a supporter of the BBC. So I just wanted to, very quickly, and I don't want this to be a political channel, in fact it's definitely not, but very briefly I just want to explain what I meant by that, because I think it's been misunderstood. When I said I was a supporter of the BBC, what I mean is I'm a supporter of public service broadcasting. I have lots of issues on varying subjects that come up in the news with the editorial stance of the BBC. On some issues I might think they've got the balance right. On others I vehemently disagree with them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about two things. The first is, only a public service broadcaster like the BBC can put out commercially non-viable programming. Now you might say, well, why are they doing that? That's a bit stupid. But some of that programming is of intense interest to certain groups of people. If you remember back in the day, it was only the BBC that broadcast programs for students from the Open University. You wouldn't get Netflix or Sky doing something like that. So a public service broadcaster plays a really important role, I think. The second point is just enter into ChatGPT or a similar AI, large language model, and ask them about the BBC World Service and the impact in terms of Britain's soft power as a result of the BBC World Service. Now, I think it has a big impact around the world, and it's viewed by hundreds of millions of people every month, often in places where they simply don't have free press or free media. So, look, I'm a bit uncomfortable even having these sorts of conversations on here, but that's what I meant. So, if you can live with that, great. If you're still not convinced, then I'm sorry. I've tried to explain what I meant by it. Where I use questions asked by an individual, I'll give a shout out to those people in the description. So thank you in advance for the questions. So here's one. What was the impact of divorce on finances Who got what and why? Okay, before I answer that, I just want to say I'm absolutely happy to be candid and forthcoming about my own situation. I've made the decision to put myself out there on YouTube, but I don't think it's right to go into details about another person's circumstances, so I won't do that on here if you don't mind. But let me start with a general point. Of course, divorce impacts finances of both parties. I find it hard to think of any circumstances where where there isn't a loss to both parties. I think that happens in pretty much all of the cases I can think of. I think, however, that sense of well, it's not just a sense, that loss can be felt even more keenly and intensely where the breakup has been maybe acrimonious, or lawyers have been involved, or maybe it's even had to go to court to get a settlement. I can imagine that one or both parties might that might make the situation worse. Now, we decided everything amicably and by agreement, so there were no other parties involved, and there was no dispute, as it were. In terms of the impact on my finances, in my case, I think there were positive and negatives. So I have, as has been pointed out, a generous pension which remains intact, and I've got that for my retirement. I suppose the downside, if you want to find a negative, was that after divorce, I had no property wealth, no equity to invest in another property, and no substantial savings to go towards a deposit. So something on the positive side, something on the negative side, but it's a balance. It's we decided that's what we wanted to do, and yeah, it was fine then, and it's fine now. Okay, the next question is, how did I prepare for retirement mentally, and what were the triggers that said the time is right? Okay, so this question caused me to think back over the course of maybe the last 8 years. So yeah, it wasn't maybe a conventional way of doing things. So I like to say I've either, well, some people, you might say I've retired twice. I prefer to think of it as I retired slowly. So in 2017, I was a civil servant. I was in a job which I really wasn't happy with. I don't think my skill set was right for the job, and I don't think the job was right for me. And to be honest, I didn't feel I was performing properly in that job. Nothing was said to me, or I wasn't taken to one side and spoken to about it, but that was my feeling. Some people might be able to just shrug that off and get on with it, take the money and carry on. But I felt increasingly unhappy with the situation, and it actually caused me some stress to be in that situation. I've not been in that position before. Of course, what I should have done is discuss that openly with my manager to see what we could do, what could be done about it. But I didn't do that. I went for the nuclear option, and I retired. I retired from the civil service with a reduced pension because I was going early, but it was still enough to pay my bills, and I thought I'll find another job somewhere. So that happened, and within a month I realised I simply had to find another job for my mental health. So I ended up back in the civil service at a lower grade with less responsibility, and initially that was on a fixed term contract, but later on a permanent basis. So that's what I did. I went back into the civil service. I did a further 8 years, and then retired finally in February 2025. So what were the factors that led to making that decision? Three things really. I'd had a couple of minor health issues, nothing serious, but I'd had a hip replacement about 10 months before that. I'd had a cataract operation, all fairly routine stuff for people in their 60s, I guess. But it just made me think, these are for me what they call the go-go years. I'm not going to enjoy better health than this in the future. So that was a big factor for me. I thought, I want to enjoy my retirement. I want at least some travel and to pursue active hobbies like this, like walking. I walk 5 miles a day, and I'd be very, very upset if I couldn't do that, at least for a few years, hopefully 10 or whatever, I don't know. So that was one factor. The second factor was finance. I was always monitoring what had built up in my notional pension pot, so what my pension was going to be, what the possible lump sum element would be, which would allow me to pay off any outstanding liabilities. And thirdly, and this was also a big factor, it was about motivation. I, for about 12 months, had noticed I just didn't have the drive that I used to have at work. I had a great team. I had a very good and interesting job, and I couldn't wish for a better manager. But I was losing the motivation, and tasks and things that had taken me, that I wouldn't have thought much about and just done them a couple of years ago. I was procrastinating over them, and I just felt I wasn't giving everything to that job by the end. So those three factors combined meant I could retire, and I thought I probably should retire. So that's what I did, and I don't regret that for a moment. Just over 6 months in, I'm enjoying retirement. So in the budget video, I explained that I lived in a shared ownership apartment that I own a 35% share and pay a reduced rent on the remaining 65%. So we have a question about that. Cliff, would you consider purchasing your flat or another one outright to avoid paying rent? Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is absolutely. I would consider it, and I've thought about it a lot, and it keeps coming back to front of mind on a fairly regular basis. But there are some factors that make it less straightforward than you might at first think. The first factor is that I'm 64 years old. So the second thing to bear in mind is that if I wanted to buy my flat, for example, or anything really in the area where I live, I would need a further £150,000 to to buy it. I simply haven't got that capital, so I would have to borrow it. And I think the pool of lenders that would be prepared to lend that sort of amount of money to a 64-year-old over a reasonable period of time in order to make the repayments manageable is probably small. I haven't looked into that in any detail just recently, but I'm guessing those are maybe specialist lenders that we're talking about, using higher interest rates to mitigate the risk. So ideally, yes, I would do that, but I'm not sure that it's realistic. Let's put it that way. Basically, if I could borrow £150,000 over 20 years, say, at 4%, the mortgage repayments would be around £900, which is something like £575 a month more than I'm paying in rent at the moment. But as I say, I'm not convinced on a pension of £32,700 at 64 years old somebody would lend to me on those terms. So the next question I've been asked is, what would you say is a reasonable amount to put into a pension each month? Now, I'm grateful for the question, but I am really not the right person to be seeking financial advice from. Those sorts of questions, really, I think you need a qualified financial advisor. All I would say, just from my own opinion, is you have to strike a balance. No single year in your retirement years is any more important to you than any other stage in your life. So personally, I wouldn't leave myself absolutely struggling during my working years in order to build up a big pension. I'd want to strike a balance. Another way I think I would probably look at it if I was trying to answer that sort of question for myself would be to have a think about what my needs would be when I reach pension age. So am I likely to still be paying rent then, or am I likely to be paying a mortgage, or would I have paid a mortgage off by that stage? I'd take into account that my travelling costs would be lower. Now in the UK we don't have the issue with healthcare, so that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. But try to have a think about what lifestyle you want in retirement and what your needs will be, and try to make a forecast in today's money, I guess, how much you would ideally need as a pension. I think there are calculators online then which you could use, using various assumptions about investment growth and inflation. You could have a stab at then, if you don't take professional advice, at getting the answer as to how much you should be putting aside every month. Sorry, I can't do much better than that. As I say, I'm not really qualified to answer that question, having been in a public sector scheme all my life, and that side of things was just done for me. I never really thought about it. Someone's asked, how did I find the communication from the defined benefit pension providers? Well, in my case, that's civil service pensions. Well, I explained that I'd gone through this process twice. The first time it went like clockwork. The second time was much more of a problem. In fact, I didn't receive my additional pension payment, the first one, until about 4 months after I retired. So I don't know what went wrong. They sent me several different quotes, and every time they would say that there was a mistake in it, and they had to send me another one out. But But anyway, I got there in the end, but it wasn't as smooth as the first time around. Next question is, did I have any problem with the tax authorities taking the right amount of tax? The answer is no, but I avoided a problem because I was checking online my tax code issued by HMRC. I was able to log on and look at that, and it was clear to me they thought I was on a larger amount than I really was. They were still factoring in my salary from work, so I was able very easily online to correct that. So it didn't result in paying too much tax, but it would have done had I not corrected that mistake. Someone asked, did you make any major financial changes 5 to 10 years before retirement to make it more viable? Well, the biggest change I made 7 years before retirement was 7 years before my second retirement was my first retirement. I was on a much bigger salary in a higher grade at that stage, so I swapped some salary for pension, took a lower paying position with less responsibility, less salary, and those are the biggest changes. But it's worked out well for me. I don't have any complaints about that. It's not made me better off, but I don't feel as though I'm much worse off. So that was the biggest change I made. Oh, and the other thing I made sure of was that by the time I finally retired the second time around, I cleared any outstanding debt. Now the next question is, did I reach a point in my career where I felt I just couldn't carry on anymore? Well, I think I've touched on this in earlier answers. The first time I retired, I'd got myself into a position where I didn't think I could carry on in that job. I took an extreme option. Perhaps I should have looked more carefully at getting help from my manager or trying to find a different position. The second time round, it wasn't that I couldn't carry on. I'd reached a stage where I felt it was right to retire for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Now here we go. I said there were two questions, or a couple of questions that slightly took me by surprise. First one is this. Cliff, why don't you find a girlfriend and split your expenses? This made me smile a bit when I read the question. But then again, I suppose it's a serious question. But you can't just go out there and find a partner, can you? And you certainly, I think, shouldn't be looking for a partner on the basis that it might cut one's expenses. And I don't think there's any guarantee about that. In my experience, it's not a given that finding a partner will cut your expenses. In fact, it might increase them. So I haven't really given that much thought, if I'm honest. I think I'm okay as I am. But thanks for the question. And finally, this was the most common question in one form or another after that budget video. I simply hadn't anticipated how many people would ask this sort of thing. I didn't realise it was such a thing, actually. And it was about moving abroad. But specifically, the question would be, why don't you move to Thailand? What are you doing in the UK when you could be living in Thailand? Why don't you move to Vietnam? Why don't you move to Cambodia? Or I suppose the most general version of it was, why don't you move to Southeast Asia? And I just lost track of how many people asked me this question. I mean, the honest answer is it's never even entered my head, but it's intrigued me, certainly. I've started watching YouTube videos about it since I made that last video and got all these questions. I mean, I'd need to throw a few questions back, which is, what would I do? I mean, would I have a footprint left in the UK? Should I sell my flat? It's a big problem with a shared ownership property. You're not allowed to rent them out, and according to the lease, you're not allowed to leave them unoccupied. So, effectively, I would have to sell my share in the flat, and that's not an easy thing with shared ownership. But effectively, I would have no footprint left in the UK. I'm not sure what I think about that. Secondly, what about? I mean, you know, I've got lots of friends here, and I know people in this town, and I've got family still in the UK. It strikes me as quite a daunting thing to move to the other side of the world where I wouldn't know anybody. Anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I'm sorry, I haven't thought that through more. It never even occurred to me before I made the budget video, but it's intrigued me. I'll say that much. And if anybody wants to respond to the questions I've raised here, then please do so in the comments. Right, okay, so that's the end of the Q&A. I hope you found some of that interesting. If so, I'd be very obliged if you would consider subscribing. But either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. That's 7 miles in the glorious sunshine, and it doesn't cost a penny.